This interview is with James Ure. James was actually my mentor back in high school. We dove a little bit into some of my personal life, and he asked some really good questions about different ideas that I was wrestling with. And so this conversation was really awesome about living true to yourself and true to your values. Obviously, I have chosen a path that is a bit non-conventional. And so we talked about choosing values and letting those guide you more than wealth and money, and being aware of how society has programmed us to believe a certain way. So awesome conversation with James about this, and I'm excited for you guys to listen to this. Have you ever felt like you have this insatiable curiosity for life? If so, I want to welcome you to the Brunson Experience, a show about nothing in particular, but everything all at once. Join me on my journey to understand the world, ponder the mysteries, and learn from the greats.
I'll just frame up this part of the conversation. You were just saying that it's not in your nature to sit in a 9 to 5.
Right.
And you're 28 years old and you've tried sitting in that 9 to 5 a couple times, and it just creates discontent for you. There's a lot of cognitive dissonance. It's just not a fit. And so you're stuck between doing a 9 to 5 where there's some security and some known quantities, or going out on your own where there's a tremendous amount of ambiguity and unknown.
Mm-hmm.
And but you can tell that deep down you're in a deeper alignment with your core nature. And so you're in that predicament, and you're 28 in your late 20s, and the whole 20s are a time where there's a tremendous amount of uncertainty and unknowns. You have these like strong desires and you have no idea how to realize them. And you start like experimenting, exploring, pushing it forward. And I can relate to that. I remember being exactly your age, and I was exactly your age when we met. And I had graduated from law school.
So weird to me, man. That makes me feel old, because in my, like, when we first met, you were ancient. I cannot believe that you were 28 years old.
Yeah.
That is so weird to me. That is so weird.
Yep. I was 28. I might have been 29 when I met you, but it's either 28 or 29. And I had decided I'm not going to follow that path. I'm not going to become an attorney. I graduated in the top of my class in law school, but it just didn't grab me. I didn't feel like being a lawyer got the best of me. And it was always when I started going out on my own for things that I started feeling, okay, that is scary. And I don't know what this means for my family, but this just feels like there's more potential here for me. And I think the 20s are a good time to explore that. And for me, I decided to start a little private school. And that was like my foray into being an entrepreneur. Of course, I'd owned like a window cleaning business like you that put me through college. So I had some. And
was it called Aloha? Was that right?
It's called Aloha Window Cleaning.
Yeah, I remember we talked about that. Hey, James, how to run a business? Yeah,
that's right. I remember that. I remember that conversation. And I just am saying all of this just to affirm and honor the position that you're in, the place that you're in, and the way that you're like following your heart, your gut, like your body, what it's telling you to do. And I know that right now it feels like there's so many just uncertainties. You don't know. There's a lot of ups and downs. It's feast or famine. But having known you for a long time, and even knowing you when you were a teenager and then in your young 20s, I can just share my reflection to you, which is you're going to thrive as an entrepreneur, and you will not thrive in any other condition. And so there are a million different ways to be an entrepreneur, but they all place you at the helm. You're the one that needs to be at your own steering wheel, sailing that ship. And you will not thrive when anybody else is sailing the ship of your life. I just think that is a true statement about you. I don't know for sure, but that really strikes me based on our experience.
That's really cool to hear, actually, from you, especially because I mentioned this to a friend of mine. I said, what's cool about talking to you is you've known me for so long. We had the conversation about me becoming a lawyer. And I felt like we cut through so much fat so quickly And I think you gave me the best advice that I could have been given on that topic, partly because you became a lawyer yourself, but it was just like, James knows me. And the way I think, the way I attack problems, the way I approach the world. And it was the best advice ever. It was like, yes, you could become a lawyer. You probably do well at it. But will you like working as a lawyer? Probably not. And in hindsight, and that we talked about that maybe a year and a half ago. And yeah, I totally think, having looked at that now, it would have been something that would have made me absolutely crazy. I think I would have loved I think I would have loved the school process, which is what you said. And I think that's probably true. And I would have loved what it did for my mind, but I would not have loved working as a lawyer. And so, anyways, yeah, that's the cool things. Anyways, I really appreciate that from you.
Mm.
I have a question, and this is something that pops in my mind only because I didn't realize you were 28 when you founded Williamsburg Academy. You were married, correct?
Yeah.
Did you have kids at this point, or were you?
I did. I had two kids. I had a 3-year-old and a 2-year-old, and the next year we had our third.
Okay, so what gives someone the confidence, maybe law school, but what gives someone the confidence they feel like they can go start a school that's so far off the beaten path? And I feel like I need to give some context for the listeners, but Williamsburg Academy is just different. And since I've never seen anyone really replicate what was there. I've never seen, I don't know, I've just not seen that really happen to anyone else I know. I really think I won the lottery being able to be in that environment with you and the other mentors. And I don't know, why would you, with kids, and that's if you're single, sure, but with kids and a complete venture in every sense of the word, and it doesn't seem like there's a lot of money. I'm just so curious. I can't imagine all the different thoughts that have gone into this, but why would you do that?
When I was a teenager, I didn't have many male role models that I looked up to and actually respected and looked at and thought to myself, I want to do my life like they're doing it. I didn't have that. I had a strained relationship with my dad. I didn't have a close, and that kind of gave me this rebellion against authority in general, which prevented me from developing meaningful relationships with adults. And I just was like a pretty rebellious kid. But then when I got to college, I began having this experience with different professors where I began to see the different brilliant things they were doing to tease out the passion and fire and to really educate their students. And it was like rare, but I just always tracked that. It was always really important to me. And I just really prioritized finding the very best professors. I didn't care what they were teaching. I just loved the feeling of being in the room with a master teacher and guide and mentor. I just loved that. And my soul got so much from that. And I remember as I became an adult and I got into my early 20s, and I began to notice that people were treating me like an adult now, not a kid. And I began thinking to myself, how fun would it be to be an adult who's in this like position of responsibility and authority and power, and to use that power solely for the benefit of kids, of teenagers and kids who don't have the resources and the ability to get all the things that they want and need. And there was something about that spoke to my core wound of maybe not having that as a kid that created a tremendous amount of fuel for me. It was a question like, what could I do for teenagers specifically that would just be amazing for them, that they don't even know they need it. They know they deeply know they want it, but they don't even know how to put words around it. And that's what was born out of that. And that's why after law school, I was like, look, I had these like opportunities to go practice for firms and stuff. And I just felt this like deeper desire. Honestly, it was selfish. It was like this, I want to do what I want to do. And what I'm curious about is what could I do for teenagers? And it felt vulnerable to tell my partner, my wife, who supported me through law school with the expectation that at the end of this, I'd have a high paying job.
Hmm.
It felt vulnerable to tell her, babe, I want to go teach. And to tell her, it looks like I'm going to make $28,000 this year. And I hope I make that much next year. There's no prospect on the immediate horizon of that going up.
Why not? Why not get rich first? Why jump the gun? Why not even put a few years into law school and try to stack some cash?
I just don't think that was an option for me. I've always had this deep inner compass about my own values. And I think you're going to relate to this, Brunson. I just don't ever fit as a cog in someone else's machine. It will never work for me. I have to be like in deep alignment with what I value. And I knew that in my 20s, that's actually the time where experiments, there's the most freedom to experiment. I'm already dealing with all the uncertainty of law school and not having a job and having these young kids. I was already bathing in uncertainty. What the hell, man? I'm just gonna add another year to that and go try this other experiment. That's really what it was. It was an experiment. I was like, I'm gonna go see. I'm gonna give this one more year. I'm gonna see what I can do in the field of education. I'm gonna see what's possible. And my guiding like light, my anchor is what awesome stuff can I do for teenagers? And I'm just gonna see. It's just an experiment. And that's really what the school was born out of. That's how Williamsburg came about, is because of that desire.
Do you have any regrets with that path? Do you wish there was the timing bad? Do you wish you'd maybe done it in different order?
No. And in my experience, I've never had a regret for trying to listen to what my soul is telling me to do.
Hmm.
I've never regretted that. I've made mistakes. I've misunderstood what my soul was actually saying. I've had to deprogram and descript a lot of stuff that was unhealthy that I didn't know was in my life that I thought was part of my soul, but it wasn't. And there's been a lot of work there, but I've never regretted doing my darndest, doing my best to follow my soul's path and take it where it takes me. I actually personally, I feel more insecure when I'm not doing that. I can tell when that's not happening. And that's when I feel like insecure about my life.
I feel like there's a lot of people who choose the smart path, right? Stable job. Like you will be a millionaire by this age just based on just raw data, right? Just overwhelming evidence. You will see they just choose a path based on just strong proven rules.
Sure.
And then on your end, I see, and I wouldn't say they're necessarily out of alignment or out in opposition to each other, but do you see it as a balancing act between just making smart decisions and following your soul? Or do you think that following your soul is always the way? Does that always supersede making traditionally smart decisions?
I'll try to answer that succinctly and with a little bit of context. And I hope the context makes sense for what I'm going to share. And the context is that over the last 400 years, two forces have massively increased their influence in the human experience. And those forces are the market, i.e. the economy, i.e. buying and selling, i.e. things that goods and experiences that are bought and sold, and the state, the government. The market and the state have for the last 400 years been gobbling up all these different parts of the human experience and have given us this like 2-column approach to everything. And I'll give you a couple examples. community. Um, we don't have as strong of a community anymore. We're not out helping our neighbors do things and having community functions as much because we can buy all of that. We pay for handymen. We do things like that now where we don't need to ask others for help. So it takes away from this part of the human experience. It's been part of our experience for tens of thousands of years. And think about caring for the elderly. That's another one. Like, how do you care for your parents? You pay somebody, you put them in a nursing home, you pay them. So the human experience is now in this like false dichotomy, or I don't know if it's a false dichotomy. It's just a restrictive dichotomy that says everything is either about money or about the government. And I rebel. My soul rebelled against that because there are aspects and elements of me as I've come to understand myself that don't fit in either of those columns, that don't fit on either of those paths. And one of those, for example, is getting my own liberal arts education, getting a deep understanding of human nature and history and societies. I'm not going to be a history teacher. Why the hell do I need to go study history? Can you see the logic in that? If I can't use this thing to make money, why would I do it? And I rebel against that. Money is just one aspect of what it means to be human. It's an increasingly important one. And if you want freedom, money now has to be a part of it, whether you want it to or not. Even if you're an awestruck artist who wants to just spend your life making art, you still have to figure out now some economic engine to support your art. And so it's something we all have to deal with. I'm not saying we should ignore it or be ignorant of it. I'm just saying it's not going to fill that void in our soul that we're all chasing. That void is going to get filled in other ways. And for me, that included spending a lot of time sitting in a room with teenagers, creating amazing project-based learning experiences for them, providing a lot of mentoring meetings, exposing them with the great ideas in history, getting deep, provocative conversations going that expand their mind and help them think about their lives and the world in new ways. That, as soon as I began experimenting with that, that began filling up my soul. And I began realizing this is what I'm going to chase for a while. This is actually doing it. And it worked against the belief that I need to get money first. So that's a long answer, but does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, and I want to make sure I understand what you're talking about. So effectively, we've been socially programmed to believe, to hyperfixate on one of the many facets. Okay, it's all about money. And this is something I've actually told a lot of my friends, is that it's a little eerie. And I'm the guy that never skips ads, right? I'm an advertiser. I don't ever skip ads. That's my favorite part of watching anything. Everyone goes off and gets chips. I'm like, no, this is the best part. Everyone be quiet. Shh. Like, I got to watch this. And it's funny. I love like a good Ford ad. And you have this dad who looks like your average American Joe. And his kids are out there and they go load up in the pickup and go out for an awesome family vacation. You could just see the love in his face. His kids are out splashing in the water. Ford. And it just zooms out with the truck in the background. And that's really what they're saying is, if you want this, you buy a Ford. Because Fords provide family. That's what it is, right? And that's what our brains do, is we go, oh man, I just need a pickup. Because imagine all the fun things we do as a family. And then, of course, in the back of your mind, unknown to you, it's, I need a Ford pickup. Because if I do that, we will have better quality family time. And there might be some truth to it, but it's funny. We've been hyper-programmed to believe everything comes back to, if I have more money, I can buy more stuff that fixes all my problems, such as family and such as, everything. You look at all the ads, they hit the full spectrum of human emotions. Everything you've just talked about, all these normal things we used to have in our society we have a pill or a bottle or a product for every single one of them now. And so that's where it's, yes, you have to make oodles of money because then you can solve all your problems through cash.
Yeah, right on. Yep.
Okay, yeah, and that's, so for you, and as I'm asking this, you've got my cogs already going a whole bunch. I'm going, man, am I really following the path that I want to follow? How do you think, how do you approach that? How do you know if you're stuck in this weird state of, it's state and economy, and I'm just hyper fixated on those two? How do you know that if that's happening, and how do you get out of that?
If you haven't deconstructed it, it's happening. If you aren't intentionally aware that you were in it, you deconstructed it, you found other options, you opted out, then it is happening and you are baptized in it and you are part of it. And so you'll know when it's no longer part of you when you've begun to deconstruct it. And you may have deconstructed it in certain areas of your life, but not had the courage to go into the bigger, deeper areas like money and security and the success and the ego and the image consciousness that comes with that. Those things take a little more attention and time and really like an internal process to deconstruct those things. But once you do, you know you've done it because they don't hook you in the same way. You don't get the same pangs of enviousness or jealousy or like that desire that I got to go do something right now that's different because I really want that thing. It's more, hey, I can see that those things would benefit me. And yeah, I'm going to work those into the strategy I have for my life, but they don't hook me. They don't own me. They don't have that same power over me that they had before.
Is security a myth?
I don't know if I'm equipped to answer that question because that gets at like the fundamental nature of the universe. And we're learning so much about the fundamental nature of the universe right now and about the human experience that it makes it hard to answer that question categorically.
Mm-hmm.
But just in a practical sense, from my personal limited view, given all my biases and all the things that I don't know and don't see, I don't think that security is a myth. I think security is a concept. I think security can be an ideal. I think that believing there's a state of human existence where you always feel secure, if that exists, I've never experienced it. Even in moments where I have a lot of financial security, that some would say that's a tremendous amount of financial security. It doesn't feel permanent.
Mm-hmm.
There are always threats. There are always risks. And the amygdala in the human brain is constantly churning that stuff. I think most people, to answer a question you didn't ask, but I feel like is underneath that question, I think most people are fixated on security in an unhealthy and unrealistic way that's out of alignment with reality. And a better question than how can I create security for myself is how can I build the attributes I need so that I can feel okay even when things change in unpredictable ways. Because I think the way most people define security is I can predict the future. If it's financial security, it's, hey, I've done this work so I can predict my financial future. And guess what? It looks great. And now I can predict my relationship future because my partner and I are deeply in love. I want that to last forever. I feel this deep security that will never change. And I think that a better approach is developing the internal awareness and willingness to see the hard truth that things will change and I can deal with it, whether it's a partner, whether it's finances, whatever it is, I can deal with that change. I think that's like a higher level skill set.
So having a more robust approach to life. And underneath that, there is a lot of, we like the fairy tale of security, I think maybe. We like to believe that things are permanent and that's us imposing our will upon the universe.
Mm-hmm.
And a very human thing, especially today, a very human thing is how much more of my world can I control to prevent anything from getting out of control. And yeah, sorry, that just got my noggin turning a little bit there. But.
Yeah. While you were sharing that, I had a question come to my mind. Can I ask you maybe a semi-personal question?
Sure.
If you had complete financial security right now, as you saw it, and what would that look like for you? 10 million bucks in the bank?
Yeah.
Something that after you could invest it for 5 to
flip it and live
10.
on interest at $1 million a year or something, or We say
Yeah.
100,000 a year. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's actually down that in. So how much do you need to make a year to feel like you've got security? If you knew you'd make this amount in the future, adjusted for inflation, how much
Hmm.
would that be?
250,000.
Okay. So you make 250. Okay. So in order to make that, suppose that you have very low investing skills and you're going to make um,
400K or something, or 4 million or something.
yeah, suppose you have 4 million invested in very secure investments that are going guaranteed to generate at least 6% a year. Okay. In fact, let's double that. Suppose you have 8 million and you're going to get 500,000 a year. Okay. Just imagine what that would feel like. Think about how relaxing that would be, all the things that you're striving for that would be satisfied, all the ways that would feel amazing for you. Okay. Now you don't have to chase that anymore. You can have whatever you want. What would change about the way you're spending your time right now in your life? What would you do instead?
There wouldn't be huge differences. I don't think. I'd buy a sailboat. That one for sure.
Mhm.
But I've thought about this, and it's funny. I think you sense exactly where I'm going with that whole stream of thinking, right? And that's classic James. But exactly, that's where I say my wheels are turning. That's what I'm struggling with, is how much of this is just fake. Because I do, and fundamentally, I've got a belief if I can just make X amount of money, this will solve a lot more of my problems. But I had the biggest jump in my income last year I've ever had, and nothing changed in my quality of living. That's not entirely true. I did go to Thailand, and that's something that spoke to my soul, right? I went to Thailand and learned to fight. That spoke to my
That's
soul,
cool.
and it was only possible because I had that freedom to go do that. I couldn't have done that and do a 9 to 5 at the same time. That was not possible. Completely impossible. So yes, I think some minor things would change, but I've already hit that. I'm already 95% there in terms of how I want to live my life. But it's funny because I find myself chasing that 500,000 a year in a frenzy. And there's some days where I'm like, no, I can surrender to the river. And other days I'm like, no, and I'm just sitting there fighting and just trying to squeeze life into a little box.
Oh, that's so relatable, Brenson. Like when I rewind and remember what it felt like in my 20s and my 30s, that continued into the 30s,
Mm-hmm.
it was just that constant, ongoing, like experience of surrendering to the flow of my passions, my existence, what I really wanted to do with myself, surrendering to the fact that I was doing what I love with you and 20 other high school kids in this room having this experience. And it felt amazing. It was surrendering to that and also acknowledging I'm ambitious. I have a high drive for a certain quality of life. And I really am willing to work hard to get that. And the disconnect between what I'm doing when I surrender to my soul and the clear path to that improved lifestyle. Like I couldn't always see how one was going to lead to the other. And in my 20s, I wanted that structure. I wanted that clarity. I wanted to know. And into my 30s, I wanted to know. And I don't know how this works for everybody. I'm like a committee of one, right? I have my
Mm-hmm.
experience with this and
Yeah.
of course my observations and whatever, but in my experience with it, my journey, what happened is when I completely surrendered to my unique ability, to my unique passion of creating something amazing for teens, it grew. I had 20 students when I met you. And the next year, I think we had 75. And the year before you, which was the very first year, I had 15. And then it went to 200, then it went to 250, and we just kept building it. And I built it for 14 years. And by the time I transitioned out of that school slash business, we had almost 2,000 students
Mm-hmm.
and it had become very valuable. And I love the experience of creating something that became valuable that I didn't know that it was going to become valuable. And I didn't know that it was actually going to lead me to the lifestyle that I have now. I just surrendered to this passion, this deep drive I had to do something amazing for kids, for teenagers, really in an effort to heal my own inner teenager, my own inner wounds, and to share. I didn't say this before, but this was another part of my motivation was I had an amazing mom who invested so much in me and believed in my unique gifts and skills. And she showed me a certain kind of love that the only way I could, and then she died in my early 20s. And the only way I felt like I could pay that back now that she was gone and I couldn't give it to her was to pay it to other people, was to give it and reflect it to other people who, just like me, didn't necessarily deserve it. And that was also a big motivation for me. So as I was doing that in my 20s and it felt so good, it was like this like blanket wrapped around my soul to be creating these experiences for teens, to be using everything I learned in law school and taking those high level educational strategies and stuff to bring into high school students. It just felt so amazing. And ultimately, eventually, it led to this high value thing that I never would have thought, hey, I want to set out to be a millionaire. I'm going to go start a little private school in Podunk, Utah. I
Yeah.
never would have thought that. But that was how it unfolded. And I love looking back at that. It's really satisfying looking back at that.
That's tremendously inspiring to take a risk like that to me. And I feel like I'm pretty risk friendly. That one would scare me at that age. That's because for me to right now to consider going and starting a school and saying, nah, I'm not going to make any money. It may never make any money. And I can't compound. The thing is, I can't understand because there's a compounding effect of having children, right? I've got just me. And actually, I remember one time we were in St. George and we hung out at the river that one time. I was living in my car, I think, either during that time or right before it, like actively just living in my Jeep, probably the last, I don't know how long. And I was like, yeah, like I can take risk because it doesn't really matter. I'm not going to starve. I can call at least 10 people that would probably feed me a meal if I needed one. And I don't need a house. And it was just all those type of things that were in my mind. But it's a pretty big surrender, it feels like, to have dependence too. And that's where, for me, I think that's where I would be scared the most is, oh man, if I get this wrong, what happens? But again, I think that's where that security myth comes in because you could get it right and your kids could still suffer. And I think that also feels like a bit of a myth. We always think that money will solve our problems when it's not most of what we actually crave.
Yeah. Like I'm curious right now, and this is maybe rhetorical, I don't know, but I'm curious right now for you as you're doing podcasts. You haven't yet, that the podcasts haven't exploded to meet your wildest ambitions yet. They're growing, they're doing well, but they haven't hit that point where you're like, yes, I love this and it all paid off.
Mm-hmm.
You're still investing and you're having this conversation with me, not knowing how this is going to move you forward professionally. But here you are asking great questions, building this conversation, doing what you do and bringing your unique like skills and gifts and presence and energy to this, not knowing. You don't know how this is all going to unfold. And so it's easier to see the courage in my path than in your own. If I were 28 again or 29 and I was your age, I would have been terrified to be doing some of the things that you're doing. For some reason, the things that I wanted to do weren't quite as scary because by that point, I knew that I knew I was gifted in working. I knew I was gifted in education. I didn't know yet how that would translate with teenagers because I'd been exploring it some in law school. I had a great first year. They invited me to teach optional Saturday classes for first year students who were struggling when I became a second year. So when I was in my second year, I was teaching these optional classes on Saturdays for kids who had been struggling. And my first class had 5 kids in it. And the next week it had more. By the time that semester was over, I had over 100 kids showing up every Saturday to come to my class and telling me, you're way better at this than XYZ professors who are teaching the same topic.
Yeah.
And that continued all through law school till I was over the whole student education program by my third year. And they were just like, yep, you get full range, like do whatever you want. And I loved it. And I was also on law review and I was the president of a couple different organizations. And I was thriving. I was loving that. And that's when I was like, look, I know I'm good at education and I want to do more with that. So I had that internal confidence. I know I'm good at this. There was the risk of maybe I'm not good at this with teenagers, and the risk of I've never started a private school. But at the same time, I also have my law degree to fall back on. And I think that's part of what gave me the confidence. And so when I look at you, I think if you were to make a list of the things that you know you're a badass at, like the things that you know you are just like really good at, and if you were to make a list of a few jobs that you know you could go get pretty easily,
Mhm.
that would immediately right the ship and pay the bills if you needed to, I think you could come up with some options, right?
Totally. And I
Yeah.
have.
So there's a
Yeah,
level,
exactly. Yeah.
there's a level of security there that I was leaning on when I went and did this. And I think it's the same for you. But you've got this level of security, not to mention all of the, that was a different conversation, but I think you've got that security you need to be able to do what you're doing. And I think we all need something like that. We all need some life raft that we know we could
Yeah.
throw in the water at any time.
Yeah, and that probably does play a pretty large role. And I think for me as well, it's a massive act of faith. Going, okay. And faith is even a strong word. It's just a blind hope sometimes. Definitely. Right. So this could totally bomb out. But again, I think that's something that's been an evolved ability, is understanding that it's all fake. The idea of, heaven forbid, what if I can make bills this month? It's, oh, then you don't make your bills. Then my credit score shot, my life is over. No, it's not over. And it's so funny because if you go all the way through the actual process, especially if you live it, which is what happened when I had to live in my car because I didn't have any money. I was eating rice and beans every day. And I was like, this is crazy. I'm making so little money. Couldn't afford, I remember just not being able to afford sour cream is the funniest thing. It's like this one of those like burning memories to pick up a thing of sour cream out of the budget and put it back. And then I was like, I was so happy. I was so happy, so content. And yes, there was like a nagging stress, but it actually got smaller when I realized, oh, like I can live in my Jeep, which is a complete beater, but like I can do it and I'm not going to die. And I don't know, it was just a funny thing. And so I think that has helped me a lot too, coming full circle to this idea. When you do live it a little bit, it does make you like, yeah, I've done this before. And I'm actually in a much more likely scenario to succeed than I was back then. So yeah, super fascinating. James, we are super over time on this, but thank you so much for chatting on this conversation and sharing these thoughts. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. As always, I'm not running ads. So the best thing you can do to show thank you if you got any kind of value out of this at all, please leave a review and share it with your friends. We'll see you on the next episode.